It's day 24 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial, and the battle over Juror 6 continued over the weekend. We have the judge's final determination on whether or not they're going to keep Juror 6 in, the only other black juror the defense is fighting for. We also have to talk about what is going on day 24 in regards to the witnesses. Will KK testify? Based on what we're seeing so far, doesn't look like it. We're unpacking again exclusively here on the KEMPIRE channel, the Sean Diddy Combs trial on day 24.
Here we go now.
Welcome back to the KEMPIRE channel, your number one source for pop culture news and music, entertainment, reality TV, and so much more. As always, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on breaking news when we go live or when we upload. And don't forget, you can hear the KEMPIRE updates on the Diddy trial on the KEMPIRE podcast. So be sure to subscribe today to that. And while you're there, don't forget to give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. And as always, don't forget the KEMPIRE After Dark, the villain era, is coming to City Winery on July 10th in Philadelphia, then City Winery in Atlanta on August 5th. Then we'll be at Union Stage in DC on August 22nd. Then back here in New York City on September 12th at the Green Room 42. Meet and greets are available for all of the shows, but there's a live stream available exclusively for the September 12th show here in New York City. Ticket information, along with everything else KEMPIRE, will be available in the description. And as always, don't forget we're raising money for the center when we talk about the issues that we're covering in these topics. The center is a place that is a source of support and comfort for a lot of people, especially in celebrating Pride Month here on the channel. Be sure to donate what you can. That will be available somewhere along your view. If you're watching from your phone, probably below the video. Thank you in advance for those that have already donated or will donate. We appreciate your support. So let's get into the Sean Diddy Combs trial because there's a lot to unpack from our summary for the day. But before we even get to that, we went live last weekend because the defense filed a motion trying to request a mistrial. It looks as if that is exactly what they were trying to do again over the weekend. And this time it's all over Juror 6. So if you saw our recap on day 23 on Friday, we told you that the judge decided to dismiss Juror number 6 because Juror number 6, his answers in regards to where he lives or where he resides were not matching up. And I felt like it was a good decision, but Diddy in court, according to sources, journalists that are in the court, in response to this, Diddy was shaking his head. He was upset about this. And part of that could be, I know a lot of people are speculating, oh, Diddy planted someone in the jury. My first inclination, Diddy did not want to lose the one other black juror on here because all it takes is one person that can relate to Diddy for these charges, for this to trigger a mistrial, for it to cause a hung jury. All it takes is that one person that might see himself in Diddy and see what a lot of you, not necessarily anyone that's watching this, but a lot of people I've seen on social media saying they're just trying to get a black man. Maybe. So a reminder in regards to some of our updates, according to our friends over at NBC News, they said on Friday, U.S. District Judge Arun Subramanian said that there were serious questions about a juror's candor and ability to follow directions. Subramanian said it was unclear whether the juror lives in New York or New Jersey, based on his seemingly conflicting answers during jury selection and subsequent discussions with attorneys and the court. And I know some of you are thinking, what's the big deal about living in New Jersey? New Jersey is a whole other state. And technically, you're supposed to be a resident of New York to be on this jury. For those that don't understand. I know for us in New York, it's sort of like Jersey's like, it's part of the tri-state area. Jersey's like New York, but it's not when we're talking about a court case. And his answers, I have to say, were a little suspect. And for whatever reason, it maybe had nothing to do with the Diddy trial at all, but has to do with something personally that he's dealing with. But it was a little suspect, his responses. If the latter, he would be ineligible to serve on a jury in the Southern District of New York. The juror, a 41-year-old black male who works in communications at a correctional facility, sits in front row on the far right, facing the parties. He's attentive and takes notes. The defense said it's very much opposed to removing this juror. And mind you, all of this was playing out on Friday, and the judge decided in that moment, yeah, it's just not worth it. This is exactly why we have alternates. But the defense argued that no, there are several reasons why we would want to keep this juror. He's shown up, he's done the work, he's been here for the last 4 weeks. Subramanian said that he'll hold off on making a final decision until today, when he will interview the juror again. If the juror is removed, he'll be replaced by one of the alternates. And that's my question for Kirsten. Kirsten Brown, prosecutor from Los Angeles County, will be back here on the channel this week because I have more questions. I need to see how she's feeling when it comes to where this case is right now. And every attorney, I'm sure you've seen so many other attorneys that are covering this on YouTube, they have difference of opinion on how this case is going. It'll be interesting to hear her perspective on this jury situation because we did in our last collaboration with Kirsten. And again, if you haven't seen it, it's worth going back and watching it, because we led into a conversation on jury selection and the type of juror that she would look for when prosecuting a case like this. As you also know, on Friday, Ye, the controversial hip-hop artist formerly known as Kanye West, arrived at the courthouse Friday in an apparent show of support for Combs. However, he never made it into the main courtroom. He only made it into an overflow room because he came late in the day. The scene was wild, with reporters running for the escalators or sprinting across the outdoor promenade to get a closer look. Ye's appearance was notable partly because so few high-profile celebrities have publicly aligned themselves with Combs since he came under federal investigation. However, Ye didn't enter the courtroom and left the building after about 30 minutes following a brief stop in the overflow area. I told you, I said, did Ye show up in order to intimidate Jane? Because remember, in Jane's last day, 6 days of testimony, she mentioned a popular rapper and his wife having their own freak off. And I said to you, I was like, I think it's interesting timing that of the last 4 weeks that Ye shows up to court. But she wasn't even on the stand that day. They said who is expected to testify. It says, as we begin week 6 of Combs' trial, prosecutors are expected to conclude their case this week. They said either Wednesday or Friday they will conclude their case. I'm assuming that there will be no court on Thursday because it is a federal holiday, Juneteenth. But I'm assuming. So as we begin week 6 of Combs' trial, prosecutors are expected to conclude their case this week with summary witnesses Anya Sankar and Delisa Penland. Prosecutors said that Penland will focus on the timeline of the alleged March 2016 assault on Combs' former girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura, at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles that was captured on security video. After that, Combs' assistant, Brendan Paul, summary witness Joseph Circillo, and Omar Hazori, a law enforcement agent, are expected to testify. So you notice no KK. So what happens with KK? Because KK has been mentioned in multiple testimonies. She's been mentioned in multiple civil lawsuits outside of this case. I'm shocked that she would not testify. Will she be testifying on the side of the defense? I'm interested to see the defense's case here. I'm really interested because after week and week of reporting on this case, again, I'm not in the room, so it's hard to decipher anything unless you're in the room. However, I have been listening to people that have been in the room, journalists that have been covering this case. I'm not 100% convinced that the prosecution has proven their case. However, again, if you saw the video that we did with Kirsten, it doesn't take a lot for them to prove RICO. They don't have to prove every statute of RICO. They only have to prove 2. And the people they have to convince is not us. It's not the attorneys covering this case. It's not the journalists covering this case. It's not the public that's following this case. They have to prove this to the jury. And the jury has to come to a unanimous decision. All right. But we shall see. I'm really interested to hear from more attorneys in regards to their reaction. Because again, I feel like I've seen so many different reactions. So the defense attorneys yesterday filed a 14-page letter with the court to make a last-ditch appeal to keep juror number 6 on the panel. And I have the letter, and I want to go through the letter today. In the letter, the defense argued that there is no valid basis to dismiss the juror, and it would be discriminatory not to allow him to remain. Citing more than a dozen examples, attorneys for Combs say the case has been an extreme exercise of overreach from its inception. All of this was a part of a coordinated effort to try to destroy one of the most successful black men in American history. And that has sort of been their defense this entire time, that they feel like this is a takedown. So I want to go through that before we get into day 24 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial, because I feel like it's necessary. I paid for these court documents. So thank you guys for the super chats and the Venmos and the cash apps, because it's not cheap doing this case, because some of these documents you have to pay for. So I paid for it. The judge. They say, "Dear Judge Subramanian, the defense submits this letter in further support of its vigorous opposition to striking juror blah, a black man. Mr. Combs," and they've redacted some of what's in here too, guys. And I wonder why. It must be maybe too identifying. I don't know. "Mr. Combs would be substantially prejudiced by the dismissal of this juror. And because there is no factual basis to remove him, under Fazio, the court lacks discretion to do so. Moreover, if the supposed inconsistencies in his answers to the court's questions were truly of concern," and then they redact something else. I don't know why. "If the court strikes juror," they redact something there, "juror, we respectfully request a mistrial be declared." Again, what is this? Now it would officially be their third written mistrial request. "We understand that the court has refused to find," and when they say the court, I'm assuming they're meaning the judge, but I guess that's the way he represents the court. "We understand that the court has refused to find any discriminatory motive in the government's actions with respect to its preemptory strikes or this motion. However, we respectfully and regrettably disagree. The government's motion must be evaluated in light of the entire history of this investigation and prosecution, and not in isolation. Unfortunately, when considered against the background, it is impossible to believe that this motion is merely a good faith attempt to raise a valid question about the juror's integrity, rather than an effort to take advantage of an opportunity to strike yet another black male from the jury." So they're accusing the prosecution of, if you look at the entire case, there have been examples of the prosecution just not being fair. They highlight their points. They says there is no valid basis to dismiss this juror. Based off the little bit of what we know and what people were reporting on about the juror, he did seem like, okay, what are you hiding here? And why can't you be explicit in regards to where your location, where you are, and why we're all confused? And again, this is why you have alternates that are sitting there all day listening to this as well. But I can see from the defense side, they don't want to remove the only other black juror. And I know you probably see people speculating, did he plan to this person? Why are you fighting so hard for this person? It could be that because of this one black man, the one black man that could relate to Diddy or has sympathy for Diddy because maybe he grew up with Diddy music, or maybe he's followed Diddy's career, even though he still has said that he can come in here and be fair. They feel like that one black juror could be the juror that will trigger a mistrial, or at least cause for them not to have a unanimous decision. Maybe. Or he could be a plant. I don't know. I'm only 1% of me believes that this person could be a plant. 1%. They said, to begin with, as the court noted during the morning session on Friday, it does not have a discretion to remove a juror where there's a bias in the removal of the juror, or where there would be prejudice to the defendant, with prejudice meaning that the discharge is without factual support or for a legally irrelevant reason. And then they cite case law. Here, there would be significant bias and prejudice to the defendant, and there is no factual support for dismissing the juror. Because I'm wondering, how do they verify your residence? Your ID? However, I need to update my ID. I just moved, but I didn't move from one state to another state. I still would be able to be a juror. They said, first, there is no question Mr. Combs would be severely prejudiced if the juror is in question were removed and replaced by the first alternate. So there must be like an order of who would be the next one in line. And from what I heard, the next one in line would be a white person. I think a white male is the next person in line. So we have previously pointed out that the juror is one of only 2 black men on the jury. But it should also be noted that he is a juror who is perhaps most similar to Mr. Combs in other important ways. He is a black man and then a redacted. So I guess maybe 2 identifying information. Moreover, this case involves serious charges of sexual misconduct against women who were in relationships with Mr. Combs. As the opening statements and the witness testimony have revealed, the principal dispute between the parties is whether Cassie Ventura and Jane willingly participated in the sexual activity at issue during their relationships with Mr. Combs for their own reasons and because they chose to do so, or whether, as the government claims, they were coerced. The fairness of the trial depends on part on having jurors with backgrounds similar to Mr. Combs, because you're supposed to have a jury of your peers. The fairness of the trial depends in part on having a juror with similar backgrounds to Mr. Combs share their perspectives on the evidence with other jurors from diverse backgrounds during the deliberations. Removing this particular juror will deprive Mr. Combs of the important perspective, and it is no answer to simply say that there are other black jurors or other males on the jury. Second, there is no factual support for the government's position or, respectfully, the court's statements Friday afternoon, which were in stark conflict with the court's apparent recognition Friday morning that the purported inconsistencies were likely completely benign. As we explained at length in our letter on June 12th on this topic, there were no material inconsistencies with respect to juror number 6. I don't know why maybe that's not what they put there. I don't know. Said during our voir dire in the June 9th Lokis. And the juror's willingness to perform this public service and his civic duty should be considered a positive rather than a negative factor. There is no evidence whatsoever that he had an agenda or bias in favor of either party, and no legitimate reason to jump to that conclusion. I still am concerned that he's lying about, or not necessarily lying, or the lack of candor. It's concerning for me. Like, I want Diddy to have a fair trial. However, at the same time, why are we fighting so hard? I get it because he's a black man and he's similar to Diddy. We're fighting so hard. He could also hurt your case. If he's being inconsistent, he could hurt the defense case too if he's lying about stuff. So there's no evidence whatsoever to have an agenda or bias in favor of either party and no legitimate reason to jump to that conclusion. I'm not going to read everything here, guys. I'm going to just read some of the most important stuff here. So they said, and so the defense submission is really that the answers given the nature of the inquiry, both in jury selection and during the current process, was vague enough so that the answers could easily be reconciled with each other. And the subject matter of what was being addressed is so far afield from the juror's performance of the duties, that's not a reason to remove the juror. The real suggestion from the government as to the reason why the juror should be removed is because if you take the inference against the juror's credibility, there is a view that if you can't reconcile the answers and the juror was being deceitful and intentionally so, either in jury selection or in the colloquy in the robing room, then that would be grounds to disqualify the juror. For that to happen, we would need to have a further inquiry with the juror because on the current record, there is an insufficient basis to make that determination. And in terms of how we view the inquiry post-jury selection, I think that there's a difference. I think that when we address these types of questions during the juror selection process, there may be an inkling or a suggestion that there is a reason to disqualify a juror for cause. And that has one standard, but it's before the exercise of preemptory challenges and impaneling of the jury. And so that has one standard. I think that the defense's suggestion, and I think it's consistent with a lot of the cases, is that default actually flips once you have the jury actually in the box and you have a regular jury and alternates. At that point, you need something more to disqualify a juror. And the cases cited by both sides have situations presented that are more extreme than what's been presented here. They say, moreover, although the court indicated a preference for further inquiry, it specifically noted, I think that it's likely that we will hear will be a perfectly innocent explanation for the answers. I don't think that's they're irreconcilable. I think that for the reasons that the defense has stated, there's a way to reconcile the entire record. The court also noted that the only reasons why this situation even came up is because of a statement that was made on the juror's own volition to the jury department staff in a friendly and offhand banter. The court further observed, they said, and there's perhaps an understandable way to reconcile all of these issues, which is that I believe that the question that was initially asked during voir dire, during the group proceedings, was where do you live? And then who do you live with? But based on the answers that were being given by the group, it could have been that the juror thought, where do I live? I live in the Bronx. And that would be consistent with everything that we've heard, because he indicated that he had moved out of the Bronx in the last 2 weeks. And there might be some ambiguity about how much time he was spending in each place. But that's at least what he said. As to the second question, he might have understood it. So we are trying to understand or predict or assume, I should say, what the juror may have meant. As to the second question, he might have understood it to be who is in your family group. As to the question, he indicated his fiance and his baby daughter. And so you can reconcile these things. And given what we're talking about, which is where do you live and kind of basic questions, it would be surprising that someone would try to make up something about it. Maybe even if there was some inconsistency, it wouldn't rise to the level of removal of a juror, given the various constitutional and other rights that the defendant enjoys. The defense expressed concerns about any further inquiry because of the likely negative and intimidating impact it could have on the juror, especially after the government started suggesting a line of inquiry that could lead to a concern that the juror's employment was somehow in jeopardy. In response to the court's comments, the government ultimately stated that the most prudent thing to do to ensure the integrity of the proceedings would be to have additional inquiry. It endorsed further fact findings, stating that such fact finding was, quote, necessary to ensure the integrity of the proceeding. The court said that it would consider the parties' arguments and whether to conduct further inquiry later. In light of the discussion in the morning, the defense was stunned when the court announced at the end of the day, in stark contrast to its extensive earlier remarks about why there was an understandable way to reconcile the juror's answers, that it believed that the juror was either unable to follow simple instructions and answer simple questions, or was shading the truth or being deceptive, and could dismiss the juror without further inquiry. Respectfully, there is simply no evidence to support the court's very serious accusation or its stated concern that the juror's ability to fairly and impartially apply the rules of the law of the court to the defense, to the facts of this case, to consider the evidence in a way, and to follow the instructions of the court. I mean, look, we have to also keep in mind they're going to receive jury instructions and in regards to how they are supposed to come to a determination of guilty or not guilty. I can see where the judge is like, you can't answer basic questions. And when we're talking about coming to a verdict, we need you to be able to answer those questions. So far, the defense, even though they have all these excuses, which are some of them are valid, I'm not 100% convinced. The court later stated that when the juror said that he had a New York license and still maintained his residence in the Bronx, this was somehow nefarious and suggested an effort to try to get onto the jury. Remember, we speculated that too. It's like maybe this guy just wanted to be on this jury because of this case. He's 41 years old. He definitely grew up in the time of Diddy. But the juror was already on the jury and had sat through over 4 weeks of trial, having been willing to serve, which many citizens aren't and haven't dutifully devoted all this time to attending the trial, why would the juror not want to complete his service? Why would he not emphasize that he's still a legal resident of New York, even if he spends several nights a week? And then I guess they include the address. There is not a shred of evidence that he has a pre existing agenda when responding to voir dire questions, as opposed to the willingness to do his civic duty. And the statements the court cited were made after weeks of service, not at the outset. I don't know what the stats are on Black men specifically or people of color specifically and jury duty and how often they're represented in juries, because I'm sure they're, again, it's supposed to be a jury of his peers. So that's interesting. Let me scroll down. So it says, should the court exclude the juror on the current record, it will no doubt have a chilling effect on the minority jurors' willingness to serve in the future. So that now they're talking about the future of people of color and Black jurors for the jury. Oh, wow, they're really going futuristic on us. Willingness to serve in the future, a step in the wrong direction. The government has previously argued that the racial disparities in jury service exist because Black and Hispanic people disproportionately fail to respond to jury qualification questionnaires. And then they cite their court citation. But Juror answered the call and is dutifully performing what the court stated was a tremendously important task recognized by the Constitution itself. We should invite his service as well as the service of other potential jurors in his community, not discourage it. I mean, they're talking a very, very interesting case. I'm not going to take away from the defense. It's giving like, come on now, we can't exclude this Black man because it's going to affect other Black people from responding to jury duty. They said, third, if the bar is this low, then, and then they redact a lot, to avoid any bias. That's not even a full sentence because they redacted most of this page. Let's go all the way down. So that was A. B, they said the government's motion continues a pattern of overreach, suggesting a discriminatory motive in challenging juror number 6. What? So then they start to cite the different examples. It says, although the court denied our Baston challenge, instead it found no basis to suggest the government had a discriminatory motive when it sought to strike juror number 6. We believe that the motive is supported not only by its remarkable decision to use 7 of its 9 preemptory strikes on Black jurors, but also by the history of the investigation and prosecution, which have been characterized by extreme government overreach from the beginning. That's interesting. Remarkable decision to use 7 of its 9 preemptory strikes on Black jurors. This is during week 1 when they were doing jury selection. This is why we're on week 6, technically. We're on week 6, but 5 weeks since the trial actually started in regards to testimony. So then they highlight, they said, 1, preemptory challenges during jury selection. They talk about what happened during jury selection. The court accepted the government's proffered reasons for its preemptory strikes of Black jurors as race neutral. So you remember, if you remember during the jury selection, during those strikes, the judge didn't see racial bias in those strikes. They said, nonetheless, it's important to note that for many of these jurors, the purported reasons themselves were based on the jurors or their relatives' interactions with law enforcement, including prior convictions. But it's well documented that there's a long history of systematic discrimination that has led to mass incarceration of Black and Hispanic people in this country. I mean, they have a point. They have a point. I have to say, his defense, I mean, he's paying a lot for this defense team, and he has a very extensive defense team. So they talk about that. They said, moreover, a 2022 study of 3,200 innocent defendants exonerated in U.S. since 1989 revealed that Black Americans are 7 times more likely than white Americans to be falsely convicted of serious crimes. Whoever wrote this up and got it out on a Sunday, y'all did a damn thing, because this is 14 pages. We're on page 7, so calm down, y'all. We're going to skip through some of this stuff. They said citing a prospective juror's former conviction or their relative's former conviction or the fact that they had a negative interactions with the police only reinforces the race discrimination that led to the over investigation and over prosecution of blacks and other minorities in this country. People, did Xavier have his team put this together? Xavier's one of Diddy's lawyers. He's also the black attorney that's on this case too. And he's very good looking. I had to say it, calm down. We're being professional. He's very good looking. People should not be precluded from serving on juries because of a prior conviction or a relative prior conviction, or the fact that they had a bad experience when the police stopped their car or a pretext or conducted a stop and frisk on a pretext. I will say, I did have a bad interaction with police years ago. I was in college. You didn't ask for the story, but this shouldn't be. I agree with the defense because I had that interaction. It shouldn't stop me from being able to be a juror on this case. I'm not saying that it would have, because you saw what Kirsten said about me. She actually would want me to be a juror on her case. So I had an interaction with police years ago. I think it was college. Yeah, definitely college. My friend was driving. He was white. He is white. He was driving a car, but we were pulled over. But when they pulled us over, all of their questions were focused on me. I'm not the one driving. And when they approached, I had taken off my seatbelt. And they were like, "Why is your seatbelt?" And I was like, "Sir, I took that off in front of you." That was like my only interaction, negative interaction with police. But it was so obvious that my white friend noticed it and pointed it out. I don't even know if I noticed it at that particular until he pointed it out. I don't remember because it was so long ago. So, but that interaction, if that's brought up during jury selection, I don't think that should have been a reason. I mean, they wouldn't select me. You're talking about this case. You've been talking about this case. You've been talking about the lawsuit. They would have held that against me. They would have not wanted me on. The defense probably wouldn't have wanted me on the case. Why do I still keep bringing this about me? It's the Leo moon in me. It's okay. So they continue in regards to their explanation. They says people should not be precluded from serving on jurors because of their prior conviction or relatives' prior conviction, et cetera, et cetera. They says here the government justifies several of its strikes on this sort of basis. For instance, it said one of the reasons for the first strike was that the juror had a fiance that served 4 years in prison for a drug conviction. A reason supplied for the second strike was that he had been arrested 3 times, including for harassing a police officer. The fourth strike was a juror whose ex-husband had spent 21 years in prison for attempted. Oh, okay, my interaction is not the same as these people's interactions. I don't know if this is proving your case, guys. The government justified, and then it goes through all the different strikes. It says the government justified its 5th strike in part on the basis that the juror had 2 brothers who each did time in prison for felony convictions. Then they said the history of investigation and prosecution. They said, for starters, it's notable that Mr. Combs, one of the most successful and self-made black men in America, and a person who is an icon not just in the black community, but in the music industry, the fashion industry, and otherwise, was indicted by the Southern District of New York's Civil Rights Unit. When the unit was established, former U.S. Attorney Damian Williams was quoted saying, "White supremacist groups are on the march. Anti-Semitism is on the march. Anti-Asian violence is on the march. Abuse of the most vulnerable in our society is on the march. But this prosecution has nothing to do with civil rights enforcement. What is being prosecuted is allegations about private sexual activity Mr. Combs engaged in with 2 of his former girlfriends and third parties." All of this was part of a coordinated effort to try to destroy one of the most successful black men in American history. All of Mr. Combs' ventures are entirely legitimate, and the government has never suggested otherwise. Instead, the government's case is all about his personal life and what he and his romantic partners have done in the privacy of their bedroom. As the trial has shown, the most significant evidence against Mr. Combs involves DV. DV incidents normally dealt with by local authorities or family courts. Yet the prosecutors have made a federal civil rights case out of how Mr. Combs and his former girlfriends conducted their private sex lives. The theory of the prosecution not only has nothing to do with civil rights enforcement, but it is also unprecedented. Indeed, we are unaware of any other federal criminal case charging racketeering or S trafficking based on allegations that a man and his past long-term adult girlfriends sometimes brought a third party, a male S worker or entertainer, into their sexual relationship. Since its inception, the case has been rife with overreach and unusually aggressive tactics normally reserved for prosecutions of violent gangs, organized crime, and terrorism. So they cite the purported victims never complained to law enforcement. Ms. Ventura's lawsuit was settled for $20 million, and she never made any complaint to SDNY or any other law enforcement agency, nor did Jane. Indeed, the government labeled her a victim and bail arguments long before it had been interviewed, long before they even interviewed her. And she claims to have testified only because she was compelled by a subpoena. They said the government has devoted enormous resources to this case. They said the undersigned are not aware of any of the recent case involving more than 5 AUSAs, and here we have 6 at a trial, along with 2 filter team AUSAs and multiple actively involved supervisors. Additionally, the Department of Homeland Security assigned multiple agents to the case, and numerous other agents have assisted at various points, including hundreds of heavily armed agents in combat gear who executed military-style raids completed with armored vehicles on Mr. Combs' Los Angeles and Miami homes of March of 2024. But here's the thing, and I know that's been an argument. Even Misa Hilton had argued that their raids were excessive. Here's the thing. I would understand if minor children were involved and they were put in handcuffs. However, we're talking about what they ended up finding, and I don't know if they had any information, maybe from Cassie, I don't know, in regards to the type of ammunition or the type of GUNs that were in his home. We were just talking last week, the type of ammunition that were found at Diddy's residence could penetrate armor. So I'm not trying to defend Homeland Security here. However, he did have weapons at this place. He had ammunition. And the defense argued that, well, they weren't put together. That was part of their argument. When they brought up experts, the ammunition and things were not together. Here's the thing. The fact that he had that at his home, that is a high security threat. So I could understand everyone, because we're not going to sit here and act as if Diddy's sons are little boys. They're grown men at this particular point. And we don't know their involvement. Right now, they're not being named or being involved. But we don't know that they're not going to go grab one of those things out of self-defense because they don't know who's coming into the home. So I can understand, like, we don't know. And again, I don't know how much information Homeland Security is given when they're going in. And they specifically said that they raided the home later in the day with the hopes of not many people being home at that time. I think the whole narrative, like, oh, these innocent young boys, they're men. They're men. And there was ammunition in the home that could penetrate armor. So we're not just talking, they just came in and if they had just found baby oil and Astroglide, I'm like, yeah, that was a bit excessive, guys. No, they ended up coming in there, finding drugs, finding ammunition and GUNs that could penetrate armor. Why do you need that, Diddy? That also doesn't make sense to me. Why would you need that? And why were the serial numbers scratched off? Why? So they continue. So they put, the government has devoted enormous resources to the case. They said the SDNY refused to engage with defense counsel during the investigation. That's one of the other reasons that they're citing. They said Mr. Combs' lawyers approached the prosecutors as soon as they learned of the investigation, even before the warrants were executed, and requested an opportunity to meet. Yet the SDNY refused then and repeatedly refused thereafter to engage with counsel substantively throughout the investigation and leading up to Mr. Combs' arrest in September of 2024. And this is where I would probably ask Kirsten. Kirsten, if you're watching this, please note this for yourself, just in case I forget. Why exactly would the prosecution not meet with his defense? There might be a legitimate reason why the prosecution would not meet with the defense. Maybe, maybe not. It's a question. Maybe they should have met with the defense. Maybe they're bringing up a valid point. I could see this being a valid point. Why are you not allowing us to speak with you to talk about this case? The prosecutors also refused to allow Mr. Combs to voluntarily surrender. Because remember that when he was originally arrested, he didn't know he was being arrested that day. But there might be a reason for that too. Presumably to create another media spectacle like the one orchestrated during the raids discussed below. So the SDNY, this is another point, the SDNY used misrepresentations and material omissions in warrant applications. This is interesting, guys. We have a couple more pages in regards to this. If you're just joining us, this is our day 24 coverage of the Sean Diddy Combs trial. If you haven't already, be sure to like the video. It's an easy and free way of supporting not just my channel, but other channels that are covering this story as well. They'll start to pop up on your Explorer page. Right now, we're reading the letter that Diddy's attorney sent to the judge, citing that there are multiple reasons why they need to keep juror number 6. Ultimately, the judge decided, yeah, it's not worth it. And honestly, I don't blame him based on what we know so far. But I'm not taking away from the defense. I feel like the defense does cite some, I don't want to say they're not valid or valid, because I have to say it's definitely something that would give me pause and say, well, let me consider this. So they said, although the court denied our Frank's motion, the defense has documented how the SDNY obtained the March 2024 warrants to search Mr. Combs' home, person, and all his electronic devices using materially misleading applications. They omitted extensive evidence, undercutting the credibility of Ms. Ventura and other witnesses. The warrant applications relied on established probable cause. For instance, when obtaining the warrants, the government completely disregarded extensive evidence then in its possession showing Mr. Combs and Ms. Ventura's relationship, though at times toxic, consensual, and loving. The applications also relied on several other witnesses the prosecutors later admitted were not credible. These witnesses were part of a feeding frenzy of grifters. Oh, not grifters, who were trying to extract money from Combs after the Ventura lawsuit became public. Yet the prosecutors failed to disclose the financial motives of these witnesses and concealed exemplary evidence that the government had in its possession when it sought the warrants. The search warrants were executed in a manner calculated to garner press attention, sensationalize the case, falsely portray Mr. Combs as dangerous, and taint any future jury pool. Which is possible. I'm not on either side of this situation. I'm taking this case as we are watching it play out. It's not lost on me that they could be right. Let's make a spectacle of this. Let's make this spectacle to make it seem like Diddy is a lot worse than he actually is. But based off the witness testimony, Diddy's pretty damn bad. But I could see how you could turn this into something bigger than it actually is. Agents leaked the government's plans to the press, and that's been an accusation. I don't know if that's ever really been confirmed, but they said agents leaked the government's plan to the press in advance to maximize media coverage and put on a show. Have they proven that? And I think the speculation around that was because of how quickly the media was able to get helicopters out there and reporters and things like that. Agents leaked the government's plans to the press in advance to maximize media coverage and put on a show. The agents used excessive force against Mr. Combs' children, who are adults, who were in his home doing nothing wrong. One agent held a semi-automatic, to the head of Christian Combs, even though he was visibly complying with the agent's demands. Another had a semi-automatic with a laser light, and we saw video footage of this. Laser light trained and the organic dot visible on the middle of the chest of Justin Combs, who was also complying with agents' instructions. The agents then handcuffed them and paraded them in front of news cameras and a TV helicopter invited by the DHS, who were waiting to get salacious footage of this staged perp walk of two innocent young men. Investigators leaked a steady drumbeat of false and prejudicial information to the press until the court issued a broad gag order obtained by the government. Throughout most of its 2024, DHS agents repeatedly leaked information about the investigation to the media, including extensive amounts of highly prejudicial false information about minors, sex dungeons, cameras in bedrooms, and a host of other prejudicial information that caused online conspiracy theories to multiply. I will say this, the government has denied those accusations, because I do remember that they were being accused in court about that, and the prosecution denied that. As the court is aware, the prosecutors repeatedly denied that these leaks emanated from its case team, but describing that team in an artificially limited way, and even opposed a request for a gag order that would prohibit all DHS agents, not just limited the few of the SCNY, claimed that they were on the case team from leaking sensitive information about the case. While this litigation was ongoing, the leaks continued. It was also after the court issued the broader gag order that the defense sought that the leaks finally cease, long after the jury pool had been deeply tainted. Since then, the government has repeatedly invoked the gag order, and to prevent the defense, which has a right to try to combat the unfair tsunami of nonstop negative coverage from any media engagement. At the same time, the government has failed to oppose in any way the numerous apparent violations of the rule by alleged victims and their counsel. Another thing they cited, they said prosecutors insisted on detaining Combs even though he did not present a risk of flight or danger. I mean, I don't know about that. They said the prosecutors insisted on detaining Mr. Combs even though he offered to surrender, travel to New York even once he learned that he would be charged and obviously was not a flight risk. They also misled the courts that held the initial detention hearings. They said, for instance, they told the district court the CNN video refuted Mr. Combs' account of the Intercontinental event, that the incident occurred after the couple had an argument over Mr. Combs' relationship, and that involved the phone. They said that that was just not what happened and just another cover-up, just more lies, even though nothing in the trial evidence contradicts the claim that the fight occurred because of jealousy in the relationship. They cited a third victim, Gina, who the prosecutors have entirely dropped from the case. So is that victim 3? Why? Because there have been accusations that Gina disappeared. That's interesting. I mean, I do feel like the defense is making valid points. I don't feel like the judge has fallen for it at all. This is taking long. Let me just highlight some of what else, because it's 14 pages, everyone. So they also said prosecutors surveilled Combs in jail and invaded the defense camp. So remember, there were accusations about remember there was some sort of like raid of MDC, and some information from his cell were taken out. And later, they were saying some of the documents that Diddy was writing on were privileged. However, the judge called out Diddy's attorney and said, you guys clearly wrote privilege afterwards on these documents. So they talk about that here as well. They also say prosecutors violated Combs' free speech rights. The prosecutors continued their spying and next argued that Mr. Combs' other writings and communications from MDC supposedly involved obstruction, even though these materials were clearly protected by the First and Sixth Amendments. Some reflected his participation in defense efforts to obtain material that could be used to challenge the credibility of the government's witnesses. Other writings describe Mr. Combs' view the prosecution is racist and his desire to get the message out. Remind you, Damian Williams, who's no longer part of the Southern District of New York, because this is what happens when administrations change. He stepped down ahead of the new administration in president. He's a black man. And before y'all say not all skin folk are kinfolk, stop. But I'm gonna get ahead of it before any of you guys do. But they said the SCNY even went as far to claim Mr. Combs' request that his children post a happy birthday message to him on Instagram was an effort to obstruct justice, because Mr. Combs hoped it would present him in a more positive light to the public and undo some of the taint to the jury pool caused by all the negative publicity ginned up by the government. Here's the thing, though. We still feel like he's doing that. Having your kids, your daughters, witness to all of this testimony that it had to be horrific for them to even hear. And then you engaging with the press. And I did see an interview that I think I saved it actually. An interview with the court reporter. The court reporter did an interview with CBS. I found the video, and this was an interview that CBS New York did with Jane Rosenberg, the sketch artist, in the courtroom. And this is what she had to say about Diddy and what Diddy said to her.
Sketching the Sean Diddy Combs trial. In fact, she's been sketching high-profile trials for 4 decades, even wrote a book about it. And she's going to describe for us what it's been like in.
So she did one with Donald Trump. She did one with Harvey Weinstein. They were showing some of her sketches. I even heard that some of the attorneys that are in these high profile cases will pay big money from the sketch artists to get one of the sketches of them in the courtroom, and they will actually frame them and put them in their offices.
Courtroom, because defendants have critiqued your artwork in the past, your depictions of them. What, if anything, has Sean Combs said to you this trial?
It was last week, but at the end of the week, it was during the lunch break. I was sitting in the front row, and he turned to me, and a marshal was standing between us, but not blocking you. And he turned to me and he said, "Gosh," I couldn't understand what he said. He's going like this, his face, and then the marshal said, "You said you need to soften him up." And then I turned to him, and then I could hear because everybody stopped talking, and he said, "You got to soften me up a bit. I look like a koala bear." And I didn't know what a koala bear looked like. I had to go and Google it. And I could see the white goatee on a koala bear. Maybe that's why people have thought that around him. Somebody said that it was tweeted out that he did look like a koala bear, but I don't know.
Has he said anything to you since? Have you adjusted your sketches in any way?
No, I haven't. No, I haven't.
And we know that in the courtroom, the judge scolded the defense and said that he noticed Mr. Combs nodding at the jury, said it had to stop. Otherwise, he may have to take certain measures. And one of those measures could be excluding him from the courtroom. What have you observed? Because, you're focused on him. You're looking at him. What have you seen him do in that courtroom?
I have seen him nodding and shaking his head no and yes a lot. Agreeing with the witness or disagreeing a lot. And then the judge scolded him, and maybe he skipped a day or two, but today he's back at the nodding and the shaking his head.
Any final observations?
This was last week when CBS did this interview. So he's back to the nodding and shaking his head. Okay.
Noticed either in the gallery or with the jury, maybe any family or friends that have been there for Combs? Anything else you've noticed worth mentioning?
I did ride down the elevator with the family after that same day as the koala bear, and they said they really appreciate my artwork, said I'm very unbiased, and thanked me. And they said, I told them that, but he just told me that I made him look like a koala bear, and everybody giggled, and then the door opened and I got out, and that was it.
Diddy, you're worried about the wrong things. You're worried about the wrong things. All right, so let me get back to this because we're almost done with this letter that the defense sent to the judge about the juror number 6. And I think it's important for us to talk about it because if we're really looking at this case from a fair perspective, I want us to also see what the defense is saying to the court, not just what is coming out from the prosecution side right now when it comes to these are their witnesses on the stand. So we still haven't even touched the surface of the witness testimony of today. We're not going to go through the transcript of that. We're just going to go through the summaries from our friends over at NBC News. But I just want to finish up what is being said in this letter where the defense is saying we cannot get rid of juror number 6. And these are the reasons. And right now they're listing all the reasons that they feel like the prosecution has been prejudiced towards Sean Diddy Combs. So they said the prosecutors violated Combs' free speech rights. Then they said prosecutors abused a filter team to access privileged material. So they talk about that. They said the government's invasion of the attorney-client privilege and the defense camp has not been limited to its seizure of Mr. Combs' notes. Throughout the case, SDNY has misused a purported filter team, which was supposed to ensure that the prosecutors handling the case were not exposed to privileged materials on numerous electronic devices and internet accounts the government has seized and searched. Following execution of the March 2024 warrants, defense counsel provided the prosecutors with the names of attorneys who had represented Mr. Combs and his businesses so that potentially privileged materials could be segregated from the case prosecutors. Our understanding was that the filter team I didn't even heard about this before, a filter team, was that a filter team would not provide any potentially privileged materials to the case prosecutors without first affording defense counsel the opportunity to review the materials so that the counsel could assert privilege if necessary. So did the defense ask them to have a filter team? Because in this letter, they're talking about, and the prosecutors are using all their resources for this case. But here you're talking about the filter team and why the filter team was put in place and why that part's not making sense to me. You're talking about how they're using all their resources, but then you're saying that this filter team was put in place in order to protect information from Diddy's client privilege. Now you're saying, well, we put this in place, but it's not working or it wasn't working. All right, let's move on from there. There are other citations for why this is unfair and removing the juror. They said prosecutors used the grand jury to help unscrupulous plaintiffs obtain publicity for wildly false claims. What? They said after Mr. Combs' arrest, while continuing its investigation, the government publicly paraded witnesses into the grand jury to feed nonsensical media narratives they knew were false. Like that guy with the shakedown attorney? Is that why? Because remember, he came out of the courthouse and it said he had just met with the grand jury? Okay. I'm pointing these out because it might be a valid point. This created an atmosphere of legitimacy surrounding the many false and wild claims about Mr. Combs and the media circus created by unscrupulous plaintiffs, lawyers, shakedown attorney, who have encouraged people to file bogus lawsuits against Mr. Combs. I might have to be on the defense side with this particular point. Prosecutors attempted, this is another point, prosecutors attempted to introduce unreliable, decades-old, highly inflammatory allegations and use allegations about additional victims who never testified to obtain search warrants and seek detention. The government attempted to prop up its case with old, unreliable, and highly prejudicial and inflammatory evidence, much of which the court correctly and fortunately excluded in granting the defense motion. And although the court denied the motion to exclude the testimony of the one alleged victim, another girlfriend who had interactions with many of Mr. Combs' employees or the alleged RICO enterprise, that individual apparently has decided not to testify. Was she paid off? And I know that's speculation, but I don't think he's above it, Diddy. And people are saying, well, he's in jail. How he's paying people off? Really? Really? Okay. Likewise, the government spent over a year claiming that Mr. Combs' former girlfriend, Gina, was a victim and used the allegation to support arguments for bail and to obtain warrants and presumably in the grand jury. Well, this is where I got to stop the defense because Gina also claims that she was a victim. Gina did an interview 5 years ago and people said that she was a clout chaser 5 years ago, claiming what Cassie's claimed and what Jane has claimed. 5 years ago, the interviews are still up. Tasha K did the interviews. So Gina claimed this 5 years ago. I don't know if Gina was paid off through a third party, allegedly. And that's why she decided not to testify. But she was claiming this 5 years ago, Gina. I don't know why she decided not to testify this time around. Despite including her in the indictment, the government has not elicited any evidence at a trial that could possibly support the conclusion that she is the victim. Prosecutors have engaged in other misconduct during trial. They said, we recognize that the court has denied our 2 mistrial motions, but as the court is aware, we believe the government asked inflammatory and highly prejudicial questions of Inspector Jimenez to try to suggest Mr. Combs had somehow orchestrated the destruction of fingerprint evidence in 2012. They're bringing this up again. And then presented testimony from Cassie Ventura and Brianna Bogolan that it knew or should have known was materially false. They're bringing this up again. As you know, this was last week they brought this up when they filed a motion for a mistrial, which the court, aka the judge, denied. The government's history of this extremely aggressive tactics in this case is critical context against which is an attempt to remove Juror 6 must be evaluated. In this case, the prosecutors have repeatedly flouted their office's self-proclaimed tradition of doing the right thing the right way for the right reasons. They said their pretextual motion to dismiss juror number 6 is just one more attempt to gain an unfair advantage at the expense of Mr. Combs' right to a fair trial, which is all we ask this court to preserve. And this is the final thing that they add here, but a lot of this is redacted. They said, for the foregoing reasons, the court should allow juror to remain on the jury. If the court truly believes his statements raise serious concerns about his ability to follow instructions, which we respectfully submit would be an unfair and unsupported conclusion based on what were at worst imprecise answers to the court's questions, then in fairness, and then they redact it. Then it says, juror, the unfairness prejudice from if the court dismisses juror, blah, 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 the unfair prejudice from replacing him with the first alternate at this stage of the proceedings warrants a mistrial. Alexander, and it says respectfully submitted, then it has all the attorneys. He has quite a few attorneys on this case. And I know one of his attorneys specializes in appeals, appellate court. I believe that is it Alexander Shapiro? Might be Alexander Shapiro. We shall see, guys. I'm going to ask some of these questions to Kirsten Brown, a Los Angeles County prosecutor. She was here the other day. If you missed that video, watch that before you watch our second part, because we won't address a lot of what we've already talked about in the previous video. But I have a few more questions. Shout out to all the attorneys. Feel free to chime in the live chat and in the comment section. But let's get into day 20. Look, I've been talking for already over an hour. So today's one is going to be long. Pause me and go grab a snack. I mean, if this is the live premiere, you could pause me, but then you'll be behind. Today's a long one, but let's get into the summary. So I won't be reading the transcripts from our friends over Inner City Press, but go and support them if you do want to read the transcript. Maybe tomorrow, where I'm not reading through a 14-page letter. I'm sending you a 14-page letter. Let's get into our summary for today from our friends over at NBC News. Oh, wait, but I'll say this. The fate of another juror who might be spoken improperly about the case with a former colleague. Oh, Lord. More jury issues, guys. I'm glad I read this before we got to the end. The fate of another juror, according to NBC News, who might have... Damn, I look like an Oprah when I do this with my hands over my head. Who might have spoken improperly about the case with a former colleague was left unresolved when the judge left the bench this afternoon. Not another juror. The judge had to dismiss a juror earlier in the day for giving conflicting answers about where he lives. That juror, who is black, might live in New Jersey and outside the bounds of the Southern District of New York. Not another issue with the jury. I'm glad I read that first, though. So let me get into day 2,034. No, let's get into day 24 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial. Speaking of the juror, the U.S. District Court Judge, Judge Arun Subramanian, dismissed a juror this morning, saying that he had concerns about his candor and whether he shaded answers to get on and stay on the panel. I wonder if the juror had to go in today. I guess he probably did, just in case the judge decided, well, no, we're going to keep you. It will be interesting because he's going to probably do interviews after this, letting people know, well, this is what it is. I don't know. We shall see. They said an alternate will replace juror number 6. The judge said that he shared defense's concerns about dismissing juror, a 41-year-old black male. So I'm sure he saw valid reasons that they sent in the 14-page letter. They said that, but the judge said that he couldn't get past the juror's inconsistent answers about where he lives, either in New York City within the bounds of the Southern District of New York, or with his girlfriend in New Jersey. And when you read through what we talked about on day 23, it does sound weird. Like, I'm not understanding, sir. And again, if you can't be clear about where you live, then you can't be on this case. So prosecutors call Anya Sankar, a paralegal for the U.S. Attorney's Office, to the stand. Whoa, that's interesting. Sankar is to serve as a summary witness or someone who offers a simplified testimony about the large volume of evidence in the case. She told the court that she reviewed text messages from cell phone extractions, call logs, other files, and 2 charts. Damn, she's got the juicy job. It's a juicy job, but at the same time, it's a lot. And shout out to all the paralegals and things like that. I know because I used to work for a law firm for years. For those that are new here, I worked for a law firm for like 15 years. I used to supervise paralegal reviews, but also mostly what we did was lawyer reviews, JD doc reviews. But we did have a few paralegal reviews where they had to review lower level documents and things like that. And I remember it doesn't matter if you're a paralegal or you work in the law field. A lot of the times you end up working just as hard as the attorneys because they're working over these weekends and these things have to happen. So they're calling you in to work. So there would be Friday evenings, Saturdays, Sundays that I would be at the office. I don't miss it. But I didn't mind it. I actually did like my job in a lot of ways. This is probably why I'm so fascinated by this case and why I had such a good time having a conversation with Kirsten, because it's sort of like, would I have been an attorney if I didn't work at a law firm? Now at this particular point, and speaking to thousands of attorneys over the years, I wouldn't become an attorney now. But what I've loved, and I remember the other day I had started to bring this up and I completely did not finish my statement. Look, I'm a 40-something-year-old man now. Can't remember everything, but I won't forget this time. We had someone in the comment section. We have a lot of young people that watch that or that listen to us or watch us. And a young person on our Spotify community said, "You're inspiring this young person to go to law school." And I was like, that's a beautiful thing. And I can see why a case like this would make you go like, maybe I should get into law. Because it's very interesting. If anything, it trains your brain when you go to law school, even if you don't necessarily pursue law extensively in the future. Going to law school will train your brain. Right, lawyers? All right, so let's get into what they're saying here. She had the task of reviewing large volumes of text messages, call logs, things like that. So a 57-year-old accountant from Westchester County was promoted from the alternate pool and into the primary panel of 12 for the jury. The white male will replace juror number 6. And this is probably why the defense knew. They knew who the next person would be, and it's a complete opposite, and it doesn't favor Diddy. And he's older, too. But he's Diddy's age. Diddy's what, 50-something? 55? He had a birthday in jail. So he's like, who knows? Who cares? He's 50-something. Okay, so they said the white male will replace juror number 6, a black male who gave inconsistent answers about his residence, the court said. There could be an issue with another juror over conversations he might have had with a colleague. We talked about this with Kirsten Brown. The juror was questioned by the judge Friday and handed his phone to Subramanian. The judge will ask the panelists more questions after the testimony today. Oh my God. The prosecution is having Sankar review the evidence she reviewed, which was extracted from the phone of Christina Curran, or KK, who served as Combs' chief of staff. I don't understand how KK does not testify. Some of the messages include apparent discussions about an S worker, and others include Courtroom instructing an assistant to set up Combs' hotel room for him before he arrived. Prosecutors also looked at messages where assistants were told to give Combs large quantities of cash. The line of questioning appears to be the government's way of bolstering its allegations that Combs uses employees to assist in his, quote, criminal enterprise. According to a text message entered into evidence from his chief of staff, Christina Curran, to other assistants in March of 2016, Combs had some very specific needs for a Four Seasons hotel room. Courtroom told staffers to ensure the room was stocked with Gatorade, water, and chicken noodle soup. In another text, Courtroom asked workers to fetch $4,000 in cash and ensured that a male S worker had access to the hotel room. We also have to keep in mind, though, that soliciting S workers is illegal in New York and other states. he's asking these people to do, I mean, we already know that. They've testified. He's asked them to get drugs for him as well. Combs' frequent employment of male S workers for marathon sex sessions became a bit of a running joke among his employees, according to text messages entered into evidence. Damn. I'm sure a lot of these employees did not expect that these text messages would be revealed to their boss. According to testimony earlier in this trial, Combs' former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, frequently hired the service of Cowboys for Angels. Combs' assistant, Ryan Lopez, texted Courtroom on December 29th of 2019, laughing out loud, "Think I saw one of the Cowboys today. You can spot them in a lobby like an S worker. I forgot to tell you about it." Damn. Courtroom texts back 4 laughing face emojis. "By the way, how long is he gonna stay awake?" Question mark. Laughing out loud, "I'm guessing until tomorrow night," Lopez responded. Combs asked his employees to pick up illegal substances for him in 2022, according to text messages entered into evidence. Prosecutors reviewed messages between Courtroom, and Combs' head of security, Fahim Mohammed, from November 24th to 2022. Well, November 24th, 2022. In the messages, Courtroom asked Combs what Mohammed needs to pick up before flying to Miami. Combs texts 15 pills of Molly before instructing Courtroom not to text about it. But then he texts that. In a May 2nd, 2017 text from the singer Cassie Ventura to Courtroom. This is why y'all need to be careful what you're putting on text. As you can see, now all of these text messages are coming out. And some of these messages have been deleted. So your messages are never truly deleted. In May 2nd of 2017, text from the singer Cassie Ventura to Courtroom, Combs' then girlfriend said no one deserves to be dragged by their hair, followed an alleged attack by the defendant. A concerned Courtroom asked Ventura if she was okay. The singer responded that she didn't know why Combs was acting out, but that she needed to stay focused on her career. Combs' chief of staff knew of his blackmail threat, according to text messages. Prosecutors then showed messages Jane shared with Courtroom in December of 2023, stating that Combs threatened to expose S-tapes, appearing to show Combs' chief of staff was aware of his blackmail threats to his alleged victim. In the message, Jane wrote that Combs was threatening to show the tapes in which she was heavily drugged to the father of Jane's baby. And Jane's baby's father has been acting out on social media. We're not going to speculate, but I'm not going to even get into it because, again, I've said this before. It's very obvious who the person is, but it's become even more obvious because the baby's father has been acting out on social media. And I'm the only one that's allowed to say that. All the speculation in the chat or in the comment section, cease and seckle. Thank you. Or you'll be blocked from the channel. In the message, Jane wrote that Combs was threatening to show tapes in which she was heavily drugged to the father of Jane's baby. Jane wrote that she was, quote, traumatized by her time with Combs and was filled with emotion. Courtroom told Jane that she had not seen Combs in 2 days and would call her. The court was played an audio file of a conversation between Combs and Jane after Cassie Ventura's abuse lawsuit was revealed to the public. Jane previously told the court that she was unaware the conversation was being recorded. Jane was distraught, telling Combs that the lawsuit felt word for word like her experience and made her sick to her stomach. Jane testified earlier in the trial. Where did they find this recording? I'm wondering, the prosecution. He obviously kept it. Jane testified earlier, and the reason why he probably recorded Jane was because he was afraid that she was going to do what Cassie did. Jane testified earlier in the trial that she felt that Combs exploited her for hotel nights and that she thought Combs used paying her rent as a tool. Text messages entered into evidence show that Ventura's bombshell lawsuit shook Combs and those around him in November of 2023. Oh, he definitely was shook. Just days after Ventura filed her civil complaint against Combs in 2023, the music mogul security guard D-Rock texted him, "I need to hear your voice, bro. I love you." Okay. Again, I'm surprised D-Rock, who's been mentioned multiple times in this criminal case, has not testified. Combs responded on November 19th, but it's probably like no rats kind of thing. Oh, I'm not ratting. He probably will testify on the side of Combs. Combs responded on a November 19th that year, Thank you for checking on me. Really appreciate it. Love you. Combs attempted to reach Mia, a former employee who previously testified for the prosecution, by calling and texting her multiple times and months after Cassie Ventura's lawsuit dropped. Remember, Mia is the one that accused him of essaying her, and she was an assistant. Phone records show that in February of 2024, Combs called Mia at least 6 times in one day and then messaged her apologizing for blowing up her phone, adding that he needed to clear up a few things. Combs said that he needed to know who was around him and when. Around the same time, evidence showed Combs' guard, D-Rock, messaging Mia and offering her a gift, though she said she didn't ask for anything. Ventura's lawsuit was filed in November of 2023, and federal agents raided Combs' home in March of 2024. Rethinking him saying that in regards to him reaching out to Mia, he could have been, remember, she was his assistant and she was there around the same time as Cassie, but we have to keep in mind, Mia and Cassie were actually really close. We have to also keep in mind, Mia claimed that Sean Diddy Combs would threaten Mia with revealing those intimate moments that they had where she claims that he essayed her. He threatened her that she was going to tell Cassie about it. But I'm trying to be fair. Let me twerking on a fence. Text messages introduced into evidence during Stankar's cross-examination showed that in 2016, Combs' team was worried about upcoming reports of him breaking up with Ventura in a confrontation that involved police. The Combs team was particularly concerned about TMZ reporting on the incident, but Combs' chief of staff, Courtroom, was ultimately relieved by what was published. It's better than it was. Definitely could have been worse, Courtroom wrote in a text message to his PR strategist, Natalie Moore. They said a text message to Combs from his chief of staff around the time that Ventura lawsuit dropped in November of 2023 seemed to show some discord between him and Courtroom. Oh. According to the message shown in court, Courtroom texts Combs to tell him that this doesn't work if he wasn't honest with her. She wrote that his keeping things to himself put them in a situation we are all in right now, adding that she felt like they were about to relive it over again. Because remember, she was fully aware of the video. She was one of the people trying to obtain the video from the hotel. But this is about her lawsuit, and this is not about the video coming out. It's not clear what the message was referencing, though it notably is around the time Ventura filed her lawsuit and Combs' relationship with Jane was breaking down. Combs' defense then went over a text from Jane to Combs telling him that she felt sexually exploited, manipulated, and drugged by Combs. Anya Sankar, a paralegal for the U.S. Attorney's Office, has left the witness stand. Prosecutors used Sankar as a summary witness to go over much of the evidence the paralegal reviewed for the court. The government called its next witness to the stand U.S. Attorney's official special agent, Delisa Penland. While she did not work directly on this case, she was tasked with reviewing Combs' investigation charts and data. Guys, as I'm doing this, be sure to like the video. It's easy and free way of supporting the channel. Also, I will be uploading an audio version to the KEMPIRE podcast for those that prefer to watch it there or listen to it there, I should say. You can also engage on our Spotify version in the comment section. Prosecutor Emily Johnson is having the U.S. Attorney's Office Special Agent Delisa Penland review flight records belonging to Jules Theodore, an S worker frequently hired to engage in freak-offs with Combs and Ventura. Penland went over text messages between the two men from December of 2009, in which Combs arranges plans to have Jules travel between New York and Los Angeles to party for a weekend. This special agent testified to the flight itinerary and hotel arrangements, confirming that a meeting took place at the London hotel between December 11th and December 14th of 2009. This appears to be a line of questioning to support the 2 transportation charges to engage in S work that Combs is also facing, in addition to racketeering and S trafficking. The judge declared a recess for lunch, but the U.S. Attorney's Office Special Agent Delisa will continue her testimony this afternoon about charts and records associated with Combs' case. The jury is back in court following the day's lunch break to resume questioning of the special agent. During the lunch break, prosecutors told the judge that DeLisa's testimony is expected to take the rest of the day. Combs and Ventura ran up a $795.63 bill at the Trump International Hotel. That doesn't even seem like a lot for rich people, right? On October 14th of 2022, records introduced as evidence in court showed the total charge for a night in the room 612 included $34 for a movie, $67.24 for breakfast, and another $100.33 for refreshments. A S worker was asked to come to the room of Frank Black, a Combs codename, records showed. The prosecution is playing videos entered into evidence under seal, meaning the jury can see and hear what is going on, but the public left in the dark. So no one in the courtroom can hear besides the jury. The judge dismissed the jury, letting them know to return for another day of testimony starting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. But here's the thing. We got more to talk about because there's another juror that potentially could be dismissed. So reminder, this is what, according to NBC News, is reporting. The fate of another juror who might have spoken improperly about the case with a former colleague was left unresolved when the judge left the bench this afternoon. Earlier in the day, the judge said a second member of the panel might have acted improperly and his fate would have been taken up after testimony. But when the judge sent jurors home, this issue wasn't addressed. The judge had dismissed a juror earlier in the day for giving conflicting answers about where he lives. That juror, who is Black, might live in New Jersey and outside the bounds of the Southern District of New York. Let me see if they say anything more about this other juror that might be potentially removed. No, they're just reminding us that it was reported earlier. Guys, this was a long one today, but do me a favor if you haven't already. It's an easy and free way of supporting the channel just by liking the video, sharing the video, donating to our fundraiser for Pride Month, going to the center. When we talk about people that are being abused, this is a place where people go for support, specifically in the LGBT community. But like I said, they're not turning away anyone. In what's happening in our government today, a lot of these charities and organizations are greatly affected and have had a lot of cutbacks. Your donation will make a difference. Or sharing the video. I understand not everyone can donate. Sharing this video, telling people about what we're doing here on the channel this month will help. So thank you to everyone that donated already. Thank you to our King's Guards. Thank you to our channel members. If you would like to be a King's Guard, you have to have been here. I have to know who you are on some level. Let me know if you are interested in being a King's Guard. I will review and possibly add 1 or 2 new members to our community of King's Guards. And King's Guards, AKA, for those that don't know what that is, are moderators of the channel. They're in the live chat. They're in the comment section. Speaking of the live chat, again, we're not moderating adults. Speaking of the comment section, the same. Be mindful. Don't attack people for their opinions in the comment section. Do not speculate on who Jane is. We've already gone through this. You will get blocked. And that's about it. Don't forget the KEMPIRE After Dark, the villain era. Okay. We're coming to Philadelphia on July 10th, Atlanta on August 5th, DC on August 22nd. Then we're back here in New York City on September 12th. Ticket information for meet and greets, live streams will be available in the description. Philadelphia, you're up in less than a month. So I'll see you guys soon. Again, I appreciate you all being here for a very long recap of day 24 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial. I got you covered for the rest of the week, except, well, Juneteenth, I don't think there will be a court, so that should be good. But yeah, here we are. Here we are, guys. I appreciate you all being here. Again, don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to donate. And don't forget to subscribe so you can be a part of our community as well. Or become a member, teamkempire.com/join. All right, enough admin stuff. You all can go home. Thank you all for being here. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching and, of course, for listening.
Here we go now.